All right, so welcome to our lecture number 6. This is for general experimental psychology and is replacing the lecture that we couldn't have live because we had some issues with connectivity today. So for the students that are looking at this video, this is going to replace. I'm going to go a little bit fast so you don't have to watch an hour and a half long video, but I do want to discuss the main points so we can address what we would have addressed in the lecture. And then for any questions that you may have, by all means, you can always reach me by email or we can talk next Friday. All right. So this is lecture 6. This is an introduction to what is the abstract and the introduction. Well, pardon the redundancy. Introduction. What to expect this week. At this point, you should have known. Homework number 5 is due on Friday, as usual, at 10:30. But because of what happened and the system going down and so forth, I'm gonna extend it until Saturday at 5. Saturday, March 6th at 10:30 a.m. So it's fine if you submit your homework past the deadline. I'm not gonna count it as late. I'm gonna be flexible with it. The attendance activity is on Sunday at 10:30, and you will have a week off for homework number 6. So you do have no homework. You don't have a homework by next week, so you can relax. And then we have spring break. Enjoy, relax, chill. And then we'll come back on Friday, March 26th at 10:30 a.m. We plan to meet though on March 12th as usual, and there is also an extra credit opportunity, which is due on March 29th. Make sure that you check that out. And spring break is scheduled for March 15th to the 19th. Enjoy. We're not gonna have anything on that date. Now, quick review of what we've seen, the empirical paper versus the literature review. As we've said, the empirical paper is something conducted by the authors, and it's a primary example of research. And here's an example. What characterizes the empirical article, and I'll say it again, is that the authors of the article were the ones that conducted the study on which the article is based. So we're gonna pretend by the second half of the semester that each of you is an author that is describing a study. So you're going to take on the role of writing an empirical article, and you're going to take the role as if you were the main researcher and if you're going to be the primary author. So you're going to write an empirical paper. The literature review is a collection of studies, and then a group of authors collectively get together and look out all the studies that exist in a specific area and then create a paper just discussing that. It's called secondary research. And what gives it away is that typically you see actually the name review in the title. That's how you know that it's a literature review. And I did mention this last time. Some of you were supposed to upload pictures of an empirical article, yet you would submit literature reviews and it was given away by the word review. So watch out with those things. Now, let's review the class experiment. So everybody should have done the class experiment last week, and the data is set. We're going to give it to you by next week, and we can talk a little bit more about this in person. But in essence, in this experiment, we are interested in whether a defendant's criminal history and your gender predict your decision making. So everybody should have read a case summary that was similar to this. There was a case summary which was given to all of you. Now, randomly, some people were given information on what is highlighted. Evidence that the person had been charged with crimes in the past. And then there would be a questionnaire asking if you thought that the defendant was guilty or not. And at the bottom, there was also a question regarding gender. So let's go back here. Randomly, you might have read that the person had a criminal history, or you may not have been given that information. So what is the independent variable and what is the dependent variable? So the independent variable is whether you receive the criminal history or not. This is the variable that was manipulated. And the other one is the gender, are you male or female? Would that affect what is going to be then given as the decision making, whether the person is guilty or not? So the dependent variable is the decision making on behalf of the juror, in this case you, stating if this person is or isn't guilty. So let's say it again, review it again. The independent variables are criminal history and juror gender. The dependent variable is the decision making of the juror. All right, we'll get the data probably by the next week or maybe after the week. No, I think it's gonna be next week. So we talk it out a little bit so we have an idea for what the results came out to be, and then we'll discuss a little bit of what we're gonna see in the second half of the semester, which is the point when we're gonna start to write the empirical article section by section. So here I just want to give you a quick introduction to what is the abstract. So I want you guys to know the abstract is the first page that you see actually here in the paper that I uploaded. You can see abstract is the first thing that you see. This is an abstract. Sometimes it has a label saying that it's an abstract, sometimes it doesn't, but it's the first paragraph. That's the abstract. So those are the key aspects of the literature review. Then you address a little bit of what is the research, what are the questions, what is the hypothesis, a little bit of what are the methods, and a little bit of results and implications. Key thing to remember here, make sure that you write it down as you're watching this. Key thing to remember, the abstract is supposed to be like a preview of what the article is about. It's a small preview, and this is pretty much the thing that a reader first looks at and then decides, is it worth it? Should I read the article or not? So summarize each major section with 1 or 2 sentences. Approximately should be 150 to 200 words. The abstract shouldn't be more than 250 words. This is pretty much standard. And you have to be concise. You got to be up to the point, state what it is about. This is where the reader decides if they will read your paper and only include information essential to understanding your study. And if you see that your abstract is pushing the limit of 250 words or is beyond that limit, then you want to start cutting off information to see what you think is necessary and what isn't. Remember, this is a preview. This is like the trailer. So I like to think of this abstract as a trailer of a movie. I'm so pumped up about Godzilla versus King Kong. I'm Team King Kong. I don't know about y'all, but when you see a trailer for a movie, if you like movies, when you see the trailer of a movie, it will give you an idea for what the movie will be about. If you just watch the trailer, you don't feel like you watched the whole movie, and that's the whole point of it. It's supposed to like lure you in to see whether you're gonna watch the movie or not. So the abstract is the same thing. It's supposed to give you a little bit of information so the reader says, well, I think it's worth it for me to actually read the rest of the article. Some of the questions that should be answered: what do you do in the study, which is the introduction? How was the study done? What did you find? And what are the important findings? Briefly touch on what is the purpose, the rationale of the study, what are the hypotheses, what are the methods, what were the results, what was the discussion and the conclusion. If it's not obvious by now, then it should be, well, the abstract should be written by the end. It's the last thing that you will write. Everything else should be written first. At the end is when you write the abstract. That's what we'll do in this course. By the time that we come back from spring break, you're going to write first a method section 1 week. Then the next week you will write a results section. Then the next week you'll write an introduction section. The next week you'll write a discussion section. And then the last week you're going to write an abstract. Here's an example of an app. Well, before that, I'm sorry. You also need to put up some keywords. Keywords that would be descriptive and pretty much are addressing what is going to be the main point of the paper. Keywords should be few. Here's a handout that was given to you that I want you guys to read. The abstract content, the format, and then at the end it's telling you what are the keywords and what is the purpose of the keyword. All right? Make sure that you watch this out. You want to include 3 to 5 words, phrases, acronyms, or something as keywords along with your abstract. So if a person is conducting a literature review, the person remembers PsycInfo, you write some keywords to find articles. The keywords are supposed to pull the articles out. Well, the keywords, if you're talking in this case, for example, we're talking about Legal psychology, the keyword might be legal psychology. So when a person is looking into legal psychology, your article will come up. And here's an example of an abstract. So this is one of the studies that I uploaded as far as an empirical study. It's called from a thing called the Proust phenomenon. Here's a little bit of an introduction. You see it. Here's a little bit about the methods, and here's a little bit about the results and discussion. It's a good introduction. I'm sorry, it's a good abstract, and it's giving you an idea for how it's supposed to look like. Yours should follow a little bit of this format, but of course, taking the information that you're using for your paper. Typically at this point, I would stop to ask if there are any questions, but of course we cannot do that right now. So email me any questions that you may have, please. Let's talk a little bit about the introduction. So there are a couple things that stand out, and I do want to make a big emphasis on them. Big point that should stand out. The introduction should address some major questions such as why is your study important? How is adding to the literature that exists already on that topic? And this is what I really need you guys to think of. Look at a triangle like that, but it's inverted. So it starts out with the broadest section and then it starts to narrow down. This is an idea for how the introduction should be. You should be very broad when you begin. So, for example, we're talking about decision making as a juror in the empirical article that we will write. When you start this paper, you want to start talking a little bit about why juror decision making is an important topic of discussion or an important topic of research. You want to start off with something very broad. You want to start talking about how maybe throw in a statistic saying in the United States, since there was research about juror decision making, you're having a correction of this percentage in the number of cases in comparison to 20 years ago. Something like that. Like something broad that introduces a topic. As your introduction then develops, it should start to become a little bit more specific. So you talk about your decision making in general here, and then as you bring it down, you start to talk about studies specifically that connect your decision making with gender or with a background in criminal history, which are the variables that we're studying. And then you're going to say, in our study specifically, we're trying to say this, and this is going to be like the most concise, specific point by the end of the introduction section. Remember, start off being very broad with a topic, and as you move down with the introduction, then you start to be a little bit more concise, you start to be a little bit more specific, and you get to the point where you're very specific by the end of the introduction. And I break it down here for you a little bit, so make sure that you review this, set the stage broadly, weave in background literature, introduce your study and hypothesis. Typically, the first paragraph is a broad introduction to the problem. Some people say that it's probably the hardest paragraph to write. I don't think it should be that hard, but well. Main thing is though that you want to get the reader's attention. So you want to start off with something that really catches the attention of the reader. And then identify basic concepts of what you're studying. And then as you move on in the paragraph, you start to talk about research. You want to summarize, choose specific work that you find important. Do not talk about the whole articles that you're reviewing. Too much information can be confusing and hard. And very important to know, what do I need to know about the articles? How was my study designed? Where did my hypothesis came from? Keep the details short to the point. And each paragraph should flow logically to the next paragraph. Always be aware of where you are and where you are going. I want to just show you here an example. This is something that we used in previous semesters. I'm not sure if we're going to use it again, but if we're not, at least I can give you an idea how a low quality paper looks like in comparison to a high quality paper. So this is the introduction section of a paper that is considered low quality by professors. The person is talking about priming. Priming is a little bit like subliminal messages, sort of. So the person is talking a little bit about that. It is proven that priming is and will be a factor when conducting experiments. And then the person talks about 3 articles. But notice what the person is doing. The first article talks about this. The second article talks about this. The third article talks about this. The person, this person that wrote this paper is making an effort to summarize, sure, but is not making an effort to synthesize. If you remember, synthesizing means that you combine the different articles and you glue them together. You don't just say one article did this, one article did that. No, but you say research on the field have done this, authors, and then you connect studies from different authors have done this. And here's a really good example, which a high quality paper. This person is talking about gender stereotypes. And this person is saying gender stereotypes have effects on many different domains. One domain is this. And then the person says, we can see this effect in other students. And then provides information for another study. The assumption is that we can find this, and then is backing this up with citation from someone else. This person is doing a good job of synthesizing, because not only is the person summarizing different articles, but the person is also connecting how the articles fit together. And that, my dear and beloved students, is the biggest challenge here. You want to find a way that you can connect the different articles so they make sense. That is why perhaps some people consider the introduction what could be the most difficult part of the paper to write. So take time. You need to take time to really lay out the introduction. The introduction is your foundation, and everything that you build on your study must be solidified on what you had for your introduction. So the introduction is work, and is very important work. Some information, main idea of a paragraph, what backs your ideas. Make sure that you always provide evidence for any idea that you're throwing out there, and then say how the evidence is relevant. And finally, you get to talk about your study. And this will be as a transition preview of the methods section. And the methods section is where you're going to discuss specifically all the steps. Remember, the methods is the recipe. But before you get to the recipe, you're going to talk in the introduction about why your study had to be conducted and why you think your study was going to be important. Give a brief overview of your study and then specify your hypothesis. Make sure that you always use scientific articles and keep the objective of the introduction on mind. What is the point of the introduction? How does each paragraph move me closer to the goal? And how does each sentence in the paragraph contribute to this goal? Interpret, connect, explain. Make sure that you review all this information. Everything is on Blackboard. Now, a couple last things to keep in mind. You're writing for an intelligent person. If you're discussing technical terms, make sure that you use examples. Try to avoid the use of jargon. So don't use words like dude, like bay, like YOLO. Don't use the words. Try to avoid using jargon and use formal words, formal writing. And well, here's just a brief recap. And just so you know what's ahead, the scientific paper overall should have the shape of an hourglass. So it should start very broadly. And then as you move through the introduction, you're going to be more and more specific. And the methods and the results is going to be the narrowest, because it's going to be very specific in here. No nonsense. And then in the discussion, you start off by discussing what the study was about, what you found from it. And then you start to broaden it up as you finish off and say why the study matters. But we'll talk about the discussion next week. This, my dear and beloved students, is the introduction section. I tried to make this video as short and up to the point as possible. If you have any questions along the road, let me know. Everybody will get credit for attendance for this week, so don't worry about that. Just make sure that you review it and bring out any questions either by email or talk to me next week. All right? Guys, thank you so much, and hope you guys have a good one. Have a good one, huh?